All right, Evan, we're live. Evan Meier is a Ranken graduate from a few years ago, and I had the pleasure of having Evan in class and was kind of a rock star all throughout Ranken. So I'm pretty excited to ask him some questions from that recent student perspective. As someone who graduated recently, went out in the workforce, has been working for a few years. So Evan, I'll shut up, and if you don't mind, maybe just introducing yourself.
Yeah, my name's Evan Meier. I think I graduated 2020, so right, a couple years ago, and things have been good so far. I mean, Ranken as advertised for me in terms of job placement rates and finding early success in the industry. I've been working as a software engineer for the last 4 months at my current job, but I've been this is actually my third job outside of Ranken. I graduated right in the heart of COVID, as you know, so it was really difficult finding a job at first. I didn't find a job until October. I graduated in May, but I right into a small company working as a kind of adjacent developer, but developing nonetheless. Was able to leverage that experience into finding a more sustained developer job at a larger company, which was great. Really got to learn new skills, got to really just be a sponge and soak in as much as I could. And then that was a 6-month contract, and that actually ended, and I had an opportunity to re-up with them, but I actually had another offer to go work at a startup. So I'm at a startup right now for the last 3.5, 4 months, and that's been great. Startups are awesome because you get an opportunity to it's kind of like research and development. There's so many new technologies you can work with, and they're kind of asking you to be full stack. Full stack meaning like you're not just working in one area all the time. So I'm kind of like all hands on deck. I'm kind of doing a little bit of everything, which is just really, really fun and challenging and kind of gets the most out of me, and I learn the most. So that's kind of been my experience outside of Ranken.
Well, that's super awesome with the software engineer title, so that's cool. So here we are 2 years later, roughly, and we've got a nice job title, of course. And then, are you comfortable sharing the name of your employer, who you're working for right now?
Yeah, they're a company called Advocado. It's avocado with a D. They're actually, they're a startup, but they have good business. I mean, we just acquired another company. So we've been bringing on new employees and new revenue streams. So I think we're probably past that startup sense or startup like tier.
Yeah.
But it still sounds cooler to say you work at a startup. I don't know. But yeah, they leverage advertising to make sure companies capitalize on what they call the micro moment. Like when you air something on TV, we're able to like track statistics, analytics across Google Ads, Bing, analytics, Google Analytics, and all these different APIs across the internet, and really track kind of like it's called lift, like traffic to these sites based on advertisements.
Okay.
And we have a cool like watermarking technology where like we can tell like when an ad has been played on the TV or on the radio. It's really just making sure that companies are getting the most out of what they pay for, and we're able to legitimize like work with data models and kind of like predictive data models to kind of say, hey, like this is like what you're doing now, and we can actually give like a data model to predict like what our company and what our service can actually do. It's really fascinating. It's really it's fun. It's new, but I like it a lot.
I'll tell you, a quick story why I think that's so interesting. So Ted Drew's, you live in St. Louis, so Ted Drew's ice cream, and you're also a baseball fan, am I right?
Yeah.
You're a Cardinals fan. So I somewhere along the way, Ted Drew's, the owner, was saying, I've advertised with the Cardinals for years. And I've always had a budget, and I don't know what the budget was, but he would just pay the Cardinals to advertise Ted Drew's ice cream. And he would say, I've had no idea how much business, because, it'd be radio ads. I really have no idea how much that return on investment was giving me, right? He would just blindly put money into advertising. And what you're saying your company does is that's no longer blind. You can now tell based on radio and TV ads, which historically you couldn't really do that very well.
Right, right.
So,
It's
so
really
maybe you need
cool.
to scoop up Ted Drews and he could actually figure it out. That's
Yeah,
a,
it's awesome. I mean, it's what's great about the business model is that it doesn't really like it's not like targeted at one demographic. It's pretty much anyone can capitalize on it.
that is
So
cool. That is cool. So what languages are you writing on a day to day?
so right now I'm in Angular as our front end.
Yep.
We have a massive Angular application, and all of our we have probably 6 or 7 APIs that we use on a daily basis. Maybe 4 or 5. That's more common, but those are all written with TypeScript. I'm not sure how much TypeScript you guys are doing, but that's just kind of a language on top of JavaScript.
Yep.
So I never formally learned TypeScript, but because of core JavaScript fundamentals, it's pretty straightforward to learn. And honestly, like you guys are in, you mentioned you're in your C# class. TypeScript is basically object-oriented JavaScript, so you're learning object-oriented fundamentals in C# right now. So when I interviewed, I had never used TypeScript before, but they gave me this kind of sample application. They said like, hey, let's add a feature to this. And I was able to use like model view controller concepts to add new features to this application that was written in TypeScript, a language I had not learned. But because we've had these core fundamentals at Ranken in second and third semester, I was able to kind of leverage those skills.
Nice. And pass the coding interview.
Yeah, yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So you're clearly working from home. Is that a full-time situation?
As of now, it is, but we actually our offices are in what's called an opportunity zone, or I'm not quite sure how it all works, but basically the federal government gives money to our company, and we have to make sure that now that kind of the COVID or the St. Louis restrictions are kind of lifted,
Yeah.
they need like 50% of like all of our work to be done in office. So in about 30 or 60 days, I don't remember what the status is, but about a month ago we got a 90-day time frame of going back on a hybrid schedule. So I'll be in the office about 3 times a week.
Okay, cool.
Which I'm honestly excited for. I like the interaction.
Yeah.
Grass is always greener though, so maybe once I'm there I'll be a little working from home, but
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's cool. So the main question that I'm, excited to ask is, hey, you graduated in 2020. You've been through our curriculum. You know what it's like from day one till graduation to employment and then thereafter. So what can anyone, brand new student or in the middle of their curriculum, what can they do to be successful at Ranken and, get that first job?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is really it's a mindset, really. My mindset is like, I'm never going to stop learning. Like I might be out of my formal education, but you want to be able to, the nature of our industry is constantly changing. There's going to be new technology to leverage. There's going to be new everything basically. So you kind of have to be able to kind of understand that you can't be complacent really. And that's something that is going to help you kind of springboard into your next career, next opportunities. It's going to help you through Ranken. You want to make sure, like the beauty about our curriculum is that everything kind of stacks on top of itself. But if you kind of start your first and second semester with, hey, like I'm going to be a sponge now, and I'm going to go out of my way to learn as much as I can here, so that my third and fourth semesters are a little bit easier, and you maintain that mindset going into the industry, and going into searching for your first job, and dealing with rejection, and dealing with maybe not being in the perfect job, but still having that mindset of, hey, I'm going to go out of my way to let's go buy a course on Udemy and take this. Let's go on Code Academy and learn something here. There's always going to be something more to learn, and that's just something you can add to your resume, and something that's a talking point that you can have in an interview, and just being able to market yourself that way in interviews, and just kind of stack your experience on top of one another. That's kind of a mindset that I have, and I think it's really helped me in my 2 years.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How did you find the curriculum at Ranken, first year, second year, like difficulty-wise? Was it easy for you? Was it hard for you? What were some of the challenges?
Yeah. First semester, I had never done like web development, so like, and I'm like, I wouldn't describe myself as creative in terms like visually. So like, building websites, I didn't find it like personally like coding wise like challenging per se, but I mean, there's that creative element that I think honestly, I think my first semester was the worst grade I had at Ranken, which is kind of sad looking back on it, but.
Because you would
But then,
probably
like,
describe that as some of the easier curriculum.
right, exactly. Yeah, I think that was just probably my own fault, obviously. But second semester, I had done Java before, so learning C Sharp very similar to Java. So I found that it was pretty straightforward, and then it all compounds, right? So I don't know quite how the transition is. You guys are doing React, right, for third semester, like full stack JavaScript.
We are.
So I'm not quite sure how that transition is going to be from C Sharp to that, but for me, like we're obviously in ASP.NET MVC on top of C Sharp, so everything that we had done in first and second semester compounded. So it was if we kind of slacked on those first 2 semesters or those core fundamentals weren't there, it was going to be a little bit more difficult. But I found that because I thought I did my work early and I had a pretty decent understanding, I didn't think that it was too big of a struggle or a transition in terms of curriculum. There's always going to be learning curves, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I think, despite that, I didn't think that it was too difficult. Yeah, I think you guys have. Obviously, the scale of your projects are going to increase, and things you're going to kind of amaze yourself with a year from now what you're going to be able to build. Like I remember just giving like final presentations, being like, man, like this has been working on this for 2 months, and like being so proud of the projects that we work on and presenting them to like a board of like businesses. It's a really cool curriculum. It's a really unique curriculum, and I'm so glad that I got to experience it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the plug there. I mean, you did it, so you worked hard, and I'm always impressed. Again, so me, I'm a first year teacher, so when I sit in on the final presentations, I'm impressed with what can be built with the skills that you learn. So that's awesome. So okay, you've been in the industry. Do you have any software that stands out in your couple of years as really like your favorite thing that you've built?
Okay, so when it's kind of funny. I interned at Regis for a little bit, my third semester at Ranken, and it's kind of crazy that I'm going all the way back to an internship. But we were working with AWS facial recognition with like police officers to be able to like take a mugshot through this application and through a massive database of already existing images, and we were using this facial recognition software to take like security footage and run it against this software and see. Like it really felt like I was working in like a movie, like
sounds like Big Brother's watching you.
yeah, it's crazy because like you see like like FBI movies and you're like, oh, run that through recognition and run that through like enhance that photo and stuff like that, and I was like, man, I'm actually like building that technology. But yeah, I mean, like my first job, I was working on like a medical record, like electronic medical record. That was kind of bland, but it was a job nonetheless, and I got experience nonetheless. My second job, I was working with, we were basically combining like cloud applications and cloud servers from like Azure, AWS, Google Cloud into one like hub, which was really, it was cool. I mean, it was a lot of it was over my head, to be honest. But it was really cool to have kind of exposure to all three of those. And then now obviously I'm working with ad detection and stuff like that. But I really like for me, like I like getting in the nitty gritty and like getting in the data. So I've been like part of like building APIs from the ground up, and that's not super glamorous to most people probably, but I've been really enjoying like getting in Postman and making your API calls and seeing like, hey man, I'm getting the data that I want back. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
they learn Postman in third semester, so they will be familiar with these tools.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. So what's a day in your life like as far as work is concerned?
Yeah. Okay. So we working at a startup is maybe a little bit different. Usually you'll have your stand up in the morning. Like my last company, I had a daily stand up at 9:30, which was just with my team of like 7 or 8 developers. And I'm sure you guys have heard the term stand up. Just you're kind of like getting in there and telling, hey, this is what I plan on doing. This is what I'm stuck on. This is what I'm going to do tomorrow. Just giving a quick rundown. But like at my current company, we actually get like all 30 employees on like what they call a huddle, and we just kind of give like our stand up to the company. It might not be the most efficient, but it's nice to kind of see everyone's faces. But then from there, I think 3 days a week I don't have any meetings, any regular scheduled meetings, so I'm in like development mode. We have story grooming on Mondays, and what that is kind of planning out the work and like kind of giving more detail to the work that you have for that week. But then like we have and then we have kind of like retrospectives, which are at the end of the week, which are kind of like going over like what went well during the week, what went well during this sprint period, what did we not accomplish, what did we accomplish, kind of like going over to make sure like we can kind of like streamline our work process. But from there, it's a lot of independent development. You kind of pick up the work you want to pick up on, and if you run into any problems, you can bring in other developers. We have a very collaborative environment, so we do a lot of pair programming where you'll get in a call and share your screen and kind of go through it together. Which I honestly like. When I was at Ranken, we didn't do a ton of it, but I didn't really like pair programming. But it's great now. I love doing that. It's great to get another perspective, especially when you're stuck on something. Because I'm the type of guy who will just beat my head against the desk until it's done, and it'll kill me to not be able to finish something. But I'd say that working from home, you have like those freedoms where like sometimes you're like, hey, like I'm gonna go take a extended lunch, or I just need to get out of my house and go drive around. But I do find that I'll probably be developing 4 or 5 hours a day at least. Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know. So more or less meetings in the morning. Sometimes you got regular scheduled meetings and talk about your work, and then other than that, it's just writing code.
Yeah, pretty much.
Awesome.
I'm not sure how much that's going to change once we're back in the office, but
yeah,
that's my day-to-day as of now, at least.
So if you had a friend that was looking to pick an industry, and they weren't sure what they wanted to do, would you advise going into this industry, and why or why not?
Yeah, I absolutely would. I think, well, one, like, the world's going towards this. Like, I'm amazed that there are still jobs out there that are just like delivery drivers. Like, that's like the fact that that still exists is crazy to me. Just because the world is really moving towards this field of technology and everything. I mean, you guys know, like, I remember being at Ranken and having the mechanic guys come in and talk about how like we're have to learn how to deal with technology in our cars now. You know, like that's where the world's going. So I definitely would. But like the great thing about developing and learning this stuff is that like you don't even need to necessarily be a developer. Like there's QA testing, there's the data scientist, there's quality assurance, there's all this, and there's even like user experience developers. There's a bunch of different like development adjacent jobs that are just as lucrative and just as important to the development process as being an actual engineer is. And then like on top of that, even like that paired with like business degrees and paired with like any business experience, having that foundation, or even like having that type of experience in like development is super important too. So I think like for someone who's like worried about like sitting on their computer all day and developing, that might not be for them necessarily, but there's a bunch of like parallel jobs that are just as important and just as lucrative in the industry.
I love that answer. That's a good answer. Well said.
Thank you.
You're welcome. A mentor that I have says that no college degree is your golden ticket for success. And those are his words, not mine. And yet, I think in society, we are pitched this idea that you get a college diploma and that's your golden ticket.
Hmm.
But you kind of mentioned that you had to continue to work pretty hard to find this success. So, what attributes were valuable to you? Because now I would say, without a doubt, you found a successful career. But you
Yeah.
needed a little bit more than just that diploma. What was that?
Um, for me, like my whole thing, like what I tell myself, and I'll shout this from the top of a mountain. uh, just avoid complacency. And there's a difference between like being content and being complacent, I think. Like I'm content right now. I'm happy with my success so far. I'm a young guy. I'm able to sustain myself, and I have a great family. I'm content with that. But I'm not complacent, and complacent meaning that like I don't want to be necessarily like in the same position that I am now 10 years from now. I want to be in a better position. Um, I want to be smarter. I want to be stronger. I want to be all these things, like, and that's not like, there's a fine line there between like being selfish and being like, like overly like ungrateful. But like, that's kind of the mindset that I have. Like, I don't want to be stuck here. I want to constantly be growing and having that room for growth. So recognizing that from an early age, especially coming outside of school, was kind of like, I think, a big key for me, especially because like just the circumstance of where the world was at, not really knowing what the industry was going to be like. When I came out of school, like everyone was hiring like senior level jobs because they just laid off a bunch of people, right? So the job market was tough. So kind of forcing yourself to that mindset of like, hey, I don't want to be complacent. I'm going to force myself to learn these more senior level skills if possible. That's kind of my mindset. It's tough to get there. A lot of trial and error, a lot of failure, but it's helped me a ton.
Man, that's another great answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's good. So you came out during a really rough time in our society. I mean, society was shut down,
Yeah.
right? Everything was shut
Yeah.
down, and you just stuck with it and you weren't going to. I don't know. You weren't going to have it any other way, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, so I got that first job, right? And I knew it was like right off the bat. It was like a small mom and pop shop type thing.
But talk about that like getting that first job was the hardest part.
It was. It was.
So what did you do to get it?
I was on LinkedIn all day. I would
8 hours a day?
basically, yeah. I mean, I wake up, get on LinkedIn, I go to lunch, get on LinkedIn, and then I'd be on LinkedIn basically, and then I get on Indeed and do the same exact thing.
Yeah.
And I faced, ton of rejection, but like I kind of in my head, I knew like I had skills that could still play, that could still be valuable.
Yeah.
So I didn't let that really deter me, and obviously I knew where the world was at, but I got that first chance, and I basically had to check my ego a little bit, because like I realized like, maybe I wanted like the glamorous job. I wanted that software engineer right off the bat, and I kind of had to take an opportunity that I didn't really see myself in 6 months from now, but I kind of used that, like getting any experience close to technology is huge for your resume, and that helped me a ton. I was not doing necessarily development work. I was working in a very, very, very outdated system, but it was close to technology, and I was able to kind of leverage that to make some points in my resume. And I basically was in a position that I didn't like, but I had the mindset of, hey, like I'm gonna have this job, but I'm gonna not stop my job hunting, because I wanted to be in a better position.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely like getting that first job is like a massive like weight off your shoulders, because once you get that in, I feel like it's exponential. Where like it's crazy like how much more like recruiters now contact me all the time, and that's not like anything special on me, but they just like see like these filters on LinkedIn can like go through like your experience, and they just see that I have more experience now. It's crazy like how exponential that is once you kind of get that foot in the door for the first time.
Yeah, so you go from being the hunter, like you're hunting for a job, to now you're the hunted.
Yeah,
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 the recruiters are coming after you.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
I'll tell you how frequent that is, in the sense of when it's very common for me to try and help someone get that first job. You know, whether it's a reference, whether it's, you know, tips or guidance or whatever. It's very common for me to try and help get that first job. Once students get, let's just call it a year of experience. I don't know what the number is. We'll just call it a year. They never come back and say, hey, help me find my second job. It literally, I think has happened one time in my career where a student came back after 3 years and was like, hey, do you have any other opportunities? And I was like, kind of shocked by it. It's very rare. So yeah, totally. You go from the hunter to the hunted.
Yeah, it's nice. It makes. I mean, that just speaks to how awesome our industry is for the employee. You know, you're always gonna. There's opportunity out there. You know, you have to like take it, grab the bull by the horns, and just take it.
Yeah. So you know, you kind of mentioned, you know, maybe having to check your ego a little bit and take a job just for the experience, and you know, I would just share like my personal. I had to check my ego when I came out of school because I thought I was going to start off on these crazy high salaries. And I'm not kidding you. My first job, and it was a technology related job. I was in tech. My first job, I was emptying the trash can. No joke. I was part-time janitor, and that's fine, you know, because I got to write code in it. But what I'm getting at is my first job was $10 an hour. Now this is years ago, but my salary expectations totally had to be in check. Because you can make $10 an hour at Schnucks. You would make $15 an hour, you know. And I had a friend working at Schnucks, just stocking shelves, making more money than I did working in technology. So personally, I had to check my salary expectations. Now, over time, you grow into those better numbers. But I guess let's make this about you. What kind of salary expectations are realistic for students to have, kind of coming out? And then let's just say with a few years of experience.
So I remember like Doherty guys coming in and talking about like how Doherty was. Yeah, I know you probably have those more recent numbers, but they would say stuff like like $65,000-$70,000 starting off.
Yeah,
just crazy.
It's 75 now.
So that's nuts.
Yeah,
that's so nuts. But I had kind of like those types of expectations, but then it was like not the case for me at all. I ended up, my first job was $20 an hour, which not bad by any means. It was more than I'd ever made anywhere else. So like I was happy, but it wasn't like quite where I thought I could be. Granted, I wasn't doing development work necessarily, and I was working for a very, very small company that was on its last legs. So it was, you know, I expected that. But like I said earlier, and this is something that's really fascinating about our industry too. Like sometimes companies don't necessarily reward you salary wise for sticking around for a long time. A lot of times your best raises and your best bonuses are going to be when you move to a new opportunity at a new company.
Yeah.
But my second job, I went from $20 an hour to 28 an hour, and that was on a 6-month contract. And I basically had, at the end of that, I had an opportunity to re-up with them, or to luckily I had this opportunity come up. I was contacted by a recruiter, and better opportunity. I don't mind sharing my numbers. I'm making $39 an hour now.
Essentially double where you were 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy how quickly things change, and how you know, just sticking around and sticking with it will actually help you a ton. And being receptive to new opportunities, being within reason, of course. But yeah, it's still a very lucrative industry, despite how things have changed in the last couple of years. It's very, very lucrative and ton of opportunity.
Well, thanks for being so transparent. I'm sure everyone, the students appreciate that because, again, I think that's realistic, as
Yeah.
far as what can you expect. So, and man, that's awesome. Congrats. You go from basically doubling your salary in 2 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that.
I
Thank
would
you.
call that I would call that a salary success.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm only 24, so I obviously I don't have a ton of like responsibility right now, and it's just great like being able to have that financial flexibility and being able to kind of like save money and set those goals for down the line. Um, yeah, I have no complaints.
Very cool, very cool. So, last question before I open it up to the students. So, is this a lifelong career for you, or do you see yourself changing industries at any point in the future?
Not as of now. If anything, like getting more into like leadership type roles within like senior developers or tech leads or
Yeah.
being more involved with those bigger decisions.
Cool.
But definitely going to be in the industry for
Awesome.
the duration. Yeah.
That's good to hear. So, you're sticking with it. Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. We can open it up to the class. What kind of questions might we have? And I'm going to repeat them just because I'm going to repeat them. Yeah.
So I guess at the beginning he was talking about how he was working with like different math. Is he the one like developing the actual math, or are you just implementing it into the code when you were talking about using APIs and all that stuff?
So, are you more of a developer of APIs or a user of APIs?
Both actually. So I came in and there were about 5 or 6 APIs that were robust and already existing. Every user story that we pick up, everything is usually adding endpoints to existing APIs. But that structure and that foundation is already there. But I have been working on building a brand new one from the ground up for a new feature that we're adding. So it's a little bit of both. I will say, like, you're gonna have a ton of reading and maintaining code that already exists, but there's also going to be opportunity to develop from the ground up, for sure.
How much of the code that you come across is well documented versus poorly documented? And how much of a challenge is it when something is poorly documented?
Yeah, I would say comments are few and far between in our code base, which is somewhat unfortunate. I will say that like I know the developer most of the time who wrote the code, so I can just ask him straight up, which is great. But I will say that I personally try to document as much as I can. Sometimes like companies have like different specifications for how they want you to document and how they want you to code. But with us being a startup, it's a lot more relaxed and just kind of do what you want. I also will say that it's easy to pick up habits from just reading other people's code and like kind of going with the flow of what's already existing in the code base. But
Hey, Paris, before you go, sorry to interrupt. We got an outsider. Paris, what questions might you have? I'm putting you on the spot. We got an outsider looking in, so I just want to see from a completely non-coding point of view, do you have any questions?
No, so I remember him.
Yeah.
It was just like a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, 2020. He graduated in 2020. So Paris remembers you, Evan.
oh, really? That's awesome.
Well, so it was kind of during COVID too, so I was here by too when you were here.
Okay.
But it was just travel probably, so I know like a lot of jobs will do, or not pay more, but sometimes the job field is a little stronger outside of St. Louis and other areas around. So if you're thinking about moving or
Oh, okay. You ever thought about relocating outside of St. Louis, maybe for money or just another city or any? Do you ever think about relocating?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm certainly open. I actually live in Edwardsville now, by the way. Yeah, moved about 6 months ago, but that's few and far between. I basically still call myself a St. Louis guy just because
Yep.
I'm 20 minutes from St. Louis.
Yep.
But yeah, I've had opportunities from recruiters come up where they're like, hey, like, you're remote, but we're based in like North Carolina. So like we want that to be in the back of your head, like, hey, we're probably gonna ask you at some point to relocate. I definitely right now, like, because I don't have a ton of responsibility and don't have a family to think about, like, yeah, I mean, I'd be way more receptive to that as of now, but that's always a big question and a big thing to think about for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Paris. I thought I'd throw you in there. John, you had a question?
What other languages do you know besides TypeScript and Angular?
Okay, besides TypeScript and Angular, what other languages have you used on the job?
Yeah, so my last one was React and a lot of Python, which I don't know very well, but it was there. Python, Java, of course. What else have we done? So at my last job, a lot of our APIs are written in Ruby, so that's interesting. Ruby's very different. What else? A lot of our also like we did a lot of like command line interface. Like I don't know if you guys do like jobs, like Jenkins and like code pipelines and stuff, but a lot of that stuff's written in YAML. If that's something.
Okay.
So that's one thing. But there's a ton of documentation on that. That's really not really hard to pick up on. It's just kind of like writing. It's really similar to like command line interface. But yeah, there's a good variety. I will say that kind of once you get those fundamentals, it's really easy to pick up on new languages. So like you'll be picking like once you learn C# and once you learn like JavaScript and Java, like it'll be much easier for you to pick up on those new things. And,
yeah, so let's talk. I got a question based on that. And sorry to interrupt again.
No, you're good.
So how long does it take someone who's an experienced developer to pick up a new language to the point they can work with it professionally, not mastery of a language, but be able to get the job done? So let's just say new language is thrown at you. Let's just use Python, even though you listed it. Let's just say you've never seen Python before. Today you're saying, hey, you got this requirement to build in Python, and how long might it take you to be able to complete that?
So my first thing, so I would definitely like, if it's it kind of, so there's two factors. Like if there's already an existing code base within Python, like that for our application, that makes my job to learn it a lot easier. So I can kind of see kind of track like how the application's working and kind of track the code, tossing new breakpoints, tossing new things to kind of understand. Syntactically, pretty straightforward, I think. I think that, but if I'm going like straight from the ground up, you gotta really dive into that documentation and kind of look up, tutorial stuff. As silly as that sounds, I will say that I would probably think within a month or two.
Yeah.
I'm pretty comfortable at that point.
To be able to learn a new language to a comfort level, we'll just call it a month or two. But then mastery of that language, how long would it take to then master that language?
Yeah, mastery, I think, of course that's subjective, but I will say probably about 3 or 4 or 5 months, just give or take, depending on how much. It just depends, but yeah, I'd say realistically about 4 or 5 months.
Ballparking numbers here. This is nothing. Like absolute. So.
Yeah, I do think it's also like an exponential thing too. Like languages can only be so different from each other. At the end of the day, like compilers work very similarly. Languages, syntax is really similar. You kind of expect some things to be consistent across. So making those assumptions makes things a lot easier as you're learning those languages.
Another question?
Yeah, I have a question about working at startups. Is it any different than working at other companies? Do you get more time with like the executives, or are you just is it like the same thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead if you heard him, yeah.
Sorry, yeah, I heard him. So my last company was a very large company. So things moved a lot slower. Like it was hard to, like we'd have questions as developers. We have to go up the rung, and they'd go up the rung to their boss, and vice versa. And then eventually, like a couple weeks later, it would come back down, and we'd finally have our answer. Meanwhile, we've moved on to something else, and we're not even thinking about that, or we've made a decision that we need to completely revert and change back. That being said, at a startup, things move a lot quicker. I actually, like to your question about speaking with the executives, like we have on our daily huddle, our CEO, COO are there every single day. And when they brought me on, I had a meeting with them directly. I went to the office and sat down, and we had about a half hour to an hour meeting. They asked about like my goals and things like that. So definitely more FaceTime with the bosses is great. I mean, I'm sure it's different from company to company, but I think the nature of startups being a lot more fast-paced and being more developer-friendly in terms of like creativity and kind of making your own decisions is definitely much more appealing to me. I think you're not like you're working for someone else, but it also feels like you kind of have the ability to take ownership over your work a little bit more, I think, and take pride in what you do. And I don't know, that's some people like the more corporate thing, and that's totally fine too, where your rules are a lot more defined and there's much more structure. But those are the two big differences that I see so far.
Cool. Question in the back.
So since he's like worked at both, which one does he prefer more?
Because you've worked at a large and a small, do you have a preference?
I think I like the smaller so far. I think that I think it fits my personality a little bit more, where I like to. I mean, I'm like a millennial, whatever. Like, I need my answers now, so it's great to be able to just go up the run, get my answer, and move on. You know.
I like that.
But yeah, I sometimes it's nice to have structure. Sometimes it's nice to have maybe a little bit more like job security at a larger corporation. Granted, like I will say that like I don't feel unsecure where I work, but I think that personally for me, I like the startups a lot more.
Yeah. Derek?
Within everything that he faced and like everything he had to go through to get this job, what's the one thing that you have like either regrets or you wish that you did differently to get to where you at now?
Okay. Do you wish you did anything differently from as part of your path from student to now? Do you wish you did anything differently?
Well, I went to a 4-year school first, and I left after 2 years with no degree, no nothing. So, like, obviously, like, if I went to Ranken right out of high school, I would have been 2 more years removed from Ranken and 2 more years in the industry. So that's something that I wasted my time on, obviously. But I think that I don't know. It's hard to say. I will say, like, I kind of like feel bad. I've in 2 years being at 3 different jobs. I don't want to like kind of give that impression that I'm like I'll hop for the next best opportunity. I don't want to have like an impression that I'm like not a loyal employee.
Yeah.
That's kind of a fine line you have to be able to kind of draw for yourself.
Yep.
So I wouldn't say that I regret that now. Maybe if that's something that maybe hinders my opportunities later down the line, that'll be something that I regret, but it's something to keep in mind now for sure.
Sure. Yeah, cool. Appreciate that answer. Other questions before we wrap up? I think that was an awesome interview, Evan. Thank you so much for your time.
Sweet.
And
yeah, I appreciate you having me.
Yep, I'll stop.